All right, let's talk about Gabe Davis, or Gabriel Davis, whatever you want to call him. Gabe Davis, the guy who, heading into this season for Buffalo, we were wondering, could he be the true number 2 receiver? Obviously, Diggs is number 1, but can he be that kind of other outside threat? And some people felt very strongly he would. Some people had some reservations. If you look at his Pro Football Focus grades from the 3 years he's been in the league now, first year, nothing special. That second year, though, of an 81.5 grade is why a lot of people felt like he could take that next step. It was in a smaller sample size than we've seen him in the other 2 years, as 665 snaps, and he wasn't the primary number 2 receiver that season. But again, his best game of the year came in that, last game of the year, that playoff game against Kansas City, and people were wondering, okay, now that we're going to give him a bigger role in the offense, how well can he do? However, again, according to PFF, they weren't overly impressed. They gave him actually the exact same grade he had his rookie year, which is still an above average grade, but it's nothing special by any means. So who's right? Is PFF right? Are Gabriel Davis defenders right? How do we feel about him heading into year 4 now? Well, first, let's talk about some negatives, and then we'll get over to some positives, because, okay, PFF didn't like him. What didn't they love about him? I do have to say, I felt like there were opportunities there for Davis to get more catches and more yards that he missed on due to just being able to get the ball. His ball skills in general were at times lacking, and this is going to be an example of it. So it's going to be a one-on-one matchup on the outside right here, and Davis, when he wins his routes, when he's at his best, he looks not just good, he looks great. Like, watch how right when this play begins, you see that at this point, okay, so Davis did a great job of not giving away what he's doing. The corner still kind of has an idea, okay, you're lined up towards the outside. There's a lot of space towards the sideline. I'm going to defend a little bit closer in that area. You see how his hips are turned just slightly in that direction, which is where Davis is going. So, okay, good stuff there. But still, Davis cuts so well, he is able to get open. However, he doesn't quite make that catch. To me, that was a catchable football. Not an easy catch, but it was a catchable football. And if I had to give Davis maybe one critique, it does feel like sometimes he doesn't come down with catches that he could. That's just something that I've seen on tape that I think could potentially turn him into that true number 2 guy that right now he, again, depending on who you ask, PFF would say he isn't, but maybe he could be if he makes some of those catches. Like, stuff like this is maybe a perfect example, actually, of what I'm talking about in my main point, where it's going to be a true one-on-one matchup on the outside. And this is Gabe Davis. Again, his route running, when it hits, it doesn't look good. It looks great. Like, that's the way to describe it. Watch what happens on this play. Watch as you see. I mean, he's going to pull off sort of a fake here and then go deep. He gets wide open. That could have been a touchdown. He just didn't catch the football right there. I mean, that would have been a great play from Davis, and it was still a great play. That's a great play from him to get that open, and if you can kind of, usually he's going to catch those, and so if he catches a couple more of those, well, now all of a sudden we're talking about him as someone who totally lived up to the expectations instead of someone who was a bit underwhelming once he finally got the number 2 job. And, listen, I should also mention, again, 836 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's not a bad season, and he even missed a couple games in there as well. So, he had a good year. He wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It just, you feel like maybe he could have been better is how I would describe it. And there were just times like this, too, which, again, we're going to get into the positives in just a second, but I just want to fully, again, I feel like with these videos, I want to make sure I give all sides of the discussion. And so something like this, we just saw it happen where, you see where he is on the screen, and watch how on display he is going to try and move, and the reality is it just doesn't work out, does not get much separation, and that was probably an ill-advised throw from Josh Allen, if we're being honest. That is kind of one of the issues with guys who tend to win with route running, is that if a smart corner is going up against you, which Patriots have a lot of smart corners, then sometimes they can kind of be all over you a little bit, know what you're about to do, and even if you make some good moves, they'll still win a good chunk of the time. The corner going against you will. So because of that, that's kind of maybe where some of the issues could potentially arise for someone like Gabe Davis. So again, those are kind of the negatives, but how do I feel about him? Again, let's go back to the original question of, can he be this sort of true number 2 receiver? Well, what do I view a number 2 receiver as? I viewed him as someone who, essentially, if you have an elite corner going against your number 1 guy, or if your number 1 guy is getting double teamed, someone who can still win on the outside. That's what you want to have happen. You don't expect them to do it with as much consistency as your number 1. A true number 1 is someone who you just can't leave one-on-one with a solid corner. You have to either have an elite corner to cover the true number 1, or you have to double team him. The true number 2 doesn't have to be that great, but there's someone who you hope that if you're going up against a good corner can at least win relatively consistently on the outside. And Davis definitely has been able to win on the outside. So this play for Pittsburgh is actually a bit of an odd play where I think that they're not expecting Buffalo to go deep here. And it's actually a play I kind of love, especially when you have a guy like Josh Allen, who I do feel like does a pretty good job at avoiding sacks, or at least can know in specific moments, hey, don't take a sack here. And so as long as you trust your quarterback to not take a sack when you're in your own end zone, a lot of times defenses will play aggressive, and let's see if we can get a 98-yard touchdown on this play. Look at how when this play begins, you see really the safety for Pittsburgh moved very far over to cover Davis right away. He was expecting them to just go a little bit, try to get off the line of scrimmage, right? But that's not what Davis is doing. Davis is instead running deep, and I have to say, I give Davis credit a little bit as well for not giving away exactly what he's doing either. He's not necessarily giving away what route he is running, so that all works together. Davis then does have the speed to run by, and he is going to be able to make the catch, and he does get that 98-yard touchdown. And the reality is, there definitely were moments, and I would say maybe even more often than not, that when he was in pretty good situations on the outside, he won pretty consistently. And this is a huge play, obviously, in a football game, a 98-yard touchdown. And a lot of times, people talk about, I think it's a pretty common phrase that people will say, either, you're only as good as your best receiver, or you're only as good as your third best receiver. Those are kind of I think what often gets mentioned, because yes, it is true. You can technically double team 2 receivers, so you need a third guy who can still be able to win and get open. And yes, it is true that sometimes on a 4th down and 3, when there's an all-out blitz, you got to just throw it up to your number 1 receiver and trust them to make a play. But I would say on the majority of snaps, the number 2 receiver can often be the guy you should be looking at. Because there were games last year where teams were just saying, we're going to double team Diggs all game, basically. And if you can get a guy who can win consistently on the outside who isn't Diggs, that's how you can basically just win those games straight up. I mean, that's really can come down to how good your number 2 receiver is. And Davis had flashes of being that guy. Like, again, this one's another one from that exact same game against Pittsburgh, where it's really, once again, going to be his route running that allows him to win here. Watch how on display, you're going to see him really, have that little fake that freezes the corner. Eventually, he passes it off to the safety, and Josh Allen has that big arm that if you can win with a little bit of space down the field, well, you're going to get a touchdown because Josh Allen can hit you. So that's just what makes this a very fascinating situation for the Bills. So, listen. Is Gabe Davis a true number 2 receiver? He's shown flashes of it. I don't know if I would say he's done it consistently enough for me to feel like he's like a great number 2 guy, but is he someone who's at least a contributor and someone who can be a very good receiver? That I would say yes, in my opinion. So I like Gabe Davis. I want to see what he can continue to do. Those are kind of my thoughts on him moving forward. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.